Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I know that most people, when they think of HR, they think of it as unnecessary paperwork and bureaucracy and probably an unnecessary expense when it comes to our businesses. And that's why I love today's guest and her business, because it is so clear to me that she views HR, and I'm actually going to broaden that to just people solutions. She views people solutions as a key driver to not only our business growth, but our success, and an essential driver for that success and growth. So let me introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Melanie Parrish. Melanie is an HR leader with over 2 decades of experience aligning people strategy with business growth. Known for her strategic insight and hands-on approach, she's partnered with visionary founders and entrepreneurial CEOs to build high-performing teams and scalable, we all love scalable organizations. As head of people and culture at Quicksilver Scientific, Melanie led the HR function through a period of significant expansion, helping the company, I love this stat, triple both its headcount and its revenue. That's the entire point of gaining more resources, is to be able to serve more people and to be able to grow accordingly. Her ability to navigate and support entrepreneurial environments, build culture, drive engagement, and operationalize talent strategies has made her a trusted partner in growth-focused environments. I know that that's going to be something that pops up so much in our conversation today, that Melanie doesn't like people solutions and HR solutions just for the sake of bureaucracy. She really views its power to harness and unleash growth inside of all of our businesses. So I'm also very excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Melanie Parrish. All right, Melanie, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. So nice to be here.
Heck yes. We're going to talk about so many different and important components of people strategy today. But before we get there, take us beyond the bio. Who's Melanie? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Well, I started my career, I really grew up in the staffing and recruiting industry. And if you know anything about that industry, it's a very sales and business centric industry. So, I essentially worked with and for small businesses and owners, and it really helped define the beginning of my career and my entry into the HR space. When I decided to shift my focus from being very specialized into being more generalized, is really because of my desire to understand and have a complete body of knowledge in all of the ways that the people function impacts business success. And so I made that shift, and that's where I am today.
Yeah, I love that overview, especially because you heard my teaser at the absolute top of today's episode about really the difference between HR being bureaucracy and meaning costs to our businesses versus that people strategy that you so love and that you help unleash inside of businesses. Talk to us about what that function actually looks like. What's the real function and purpose of HR? And then how do we zoom that out into that overarching people strategy?
So I'll talk about in my niche, and so because that's my specialty, is working with entrepreneurs, owners, founders of companies that are typically under 50 employees, because they are really not large enough to have an internal people leader on their team. Makes sense. They're small, they're running super lean, nimble, trying to grow, scale, and just basically keep the doors open and the wheels on the bus for a future that, those owners see down the road. So for me, it's really meeting those entrepreneurs where they are, at whatever state they are in their business. And what that looks like, and I'll give you a great example, is I began working with a company, a client. They actually been in business for like 20 years, a generational family-owned business, and they had never, ever had an HR expertise in any way come into their business. And that's could be a little scary, but bringing me on board was because I saw a future where the people component needed to be shored up. The workforce landscape now, as we all know, is drastically changed, and what was okay to get away with 10 years ago with your people, your staff, your employees, it's just the expectations are entirely different. So coming in and understanding what they were actually doing with their people. I do an audit and assessment, and that's really a way for me to really get under the hood of their business, because it's not just, are you doing this or that? It's, what is your actual business? How do your people function within driving your business? And then we look at all the components of that from a legal and regulatory standpoint, and as far as best practices. How are you recruiting? What are your recruiting processes? What are your policies? Do your policies serve your employees, or do they even serve your business, really? Because sometimes they don't. Do you have written policies? Because sometimes that's not a thing either. And so we begin to build the foundation. If one hasn't been built, we start rebuilding it. And if it's a startup, we start with the main building blocks from the get-go, starting to establish those things.
Yeah, I want to go deeper there then, because right off the bat, Melanie, even just those insights show me that whereas a lot of people think, oh, when it comes to people, I have to figure out how much do I pay them, when do I pay them, how do I pay them, and then what is it that they're tasked to do, and obviously benefits factor into that. I actually heard a way more business-oriented answer from you just then, is you're interested in how the business functions and how the people are going to be a core component of that business's growth. What's that inventory, or what's that audit look like? What are the facets of the business that you're looking at to make sure that we have the foundational aspects of putting people in the right places to succeed?
So that audit covers like the main functional components of HR. It does cover your legal, black and white legal, federal, state level legal components which are your I-9s in order? Do you have any I-9s? Some states require E-Verify, some don't. Are you doing that? That's like black and white basic. Are you following, the employee classifications for the Department of Labor, classifications? Are those correct? These are very black and white things that are can be very complex for an owner to understand, but they're very basic. But then we move beyond that into components, recruiting processes. How do you recruit? Do you have a process in place? Do you have an ATS, applicant tracking system, do you use? And we move into benefits. Do you offer benefits? Should you be offering benefits? What is the size of your company? And if you don't, what kind of benefits could you possibly be offering for employees? We also get into workers' compensation management, which for some industries, that's a really big component of understanding, are you handling your workers' comp program correctly, because that impacts your business and your employees directly, and your bottom line potentially. And performance management is like, how do you give feedback to your employees based on their performance? So I'm not asking necessarily, do you have a 360-degree feedback program in place? I'm just asking, what do you do? Is it informal or is it formal? And really looking under the hood of all of those components and digging in to see just how is your business being done through people.
Melanie, I'll be honest with you, while we're here together on the air, most of what I do as an active listener is I think about what the listener is thinking of. And as you're listing those things out, I would imagine that way too many business owners hear all of those different elements and components that you look at and that you help them to make sense of. And they probably think to themselves, I'll deal with it when we have an issue. When I hear I-9 compliances, they probably think, yeah, it hasn't been an issue up to this point. Why am I going to address it now? Workers' comp hasn't been an issue. How do you address that with business owners? Because I feel like in so many ways, especially, whether it's car insurance, whether it's anything, we like to kick the can down the road, and we like to pretend that not only is everything great today, but it'll continue to be great tomorrow. How do you get over that hump with businesses?
That's a really great point, because that is often the conversation I end up having. And I think the one thing I particularly do with these smaller businesses and owners is I'm not trying to treat them like they're a 500-person company. You're buttoned up in a completely different way, and you have systems in place that are completely different. So I'm definitely trying and helping them to understand that I'm not looking at them from that lens. I'm looking at them from where they actually are. What are their fundamental needs? So, for instance, if it's we haven't had a problem, so why do we need to make a change? And usually, oftentimes, the company has been in business maybe for some period of time. And when they started, they were maybe a handful of people, and now they've worked their way to maybe 20, 30, 40 employees. And their risk becomes significantly larger when they are not compliant in certain areas. So typically, what I have to walk them through is a scenario of that's great, because 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it didn't. You not being buttoned up in that area, your revenue was less than half of what it is now, and you had a small number of employees on payroll. So your risk was much smaller. Now you have a whole fleet of people, as well as significant more revenue that you establish your life and your business around, and your risk is higher. So here's what can happen if we don't fix this now. Here's the potential that might happen. And I find that owners and entrepreneurs really genuinely so care about the employees, and they carry the burden of these people's paychecks rely on me. And so so it's not just about them losing their livelihood if they make a really bad choice, say with workers' comp management and things like that. It's our employment practices that get them into trouble, but they also realize how it will impact the 20 people or so that are, their livelihood is depending on this owner making good decisions. So I kind of appeal to that, and I find that that's where I get the most impact.
Yeah, that's so well said, especially because all of us as business owners and entrepreneurs, these are our babies. We started this because we care about it. And you made an important point that I really want to echo and reemphasize for listeners here, is that when you hire someone, that is so exciting because it's no longer about you. And I think that as solopreneurs, we kind of fall into that trap of thinking that we are our business and vice versa. But when we expand our teams, that's so exciting. And I find myself motivated to provide growth opportunities and provide an incredible experience for the people who are on my teams across my businesses. And Melanie, that level of intention and strategy and foresight, that's the way that we can actually make a big difference there. So I want to come back. I jotted it down as soon as you said it. You brought up performance management, and I will confess to you while we're on the air together that that's been one of the hardest things for me to learn. Especially, I started my first business when I was 19. Who's a 19-year-old to tell everybody else how they're doing at their job? So that's something that as I've grown into through entrepreneurial experience, of course, through age and maturity and some wisdom, hopefully blended in there along the way. What are some ways that we should think about performance management and having it be valuable for the people on our teams?
So again, I speak from the perspective of the small business owner and the small company, which is different than a larger, mid-size or larger company. I tell my clients, you need to just basically have a culture of feedback. If that's all that you do, you're ahead of the game. Meaning you have embedded a culture where employees know where they stand and they know how you feel about how they're doing. And there's many, many ways you can do that. There's no one right way to do it. And a lot of the times how a company does it is based on their culture. I have a client that does quarterly check-ins with employees as well as annual performance reviews, more written performance reviews. I have another company that does just annual reviews, but they had never done them formally. And so we had to institute that as a feedback mechanism because the company is moving so quickly. The more one-on-ones were not really feasible for them for where they were as a company and the kind of work that they did. So a culture of feedback is encouraging your leaders or managers or supervisors to give employees feedback. That doesn't mean always give them negative feedback. It means also give them positive feedback. If that's in an email, if it's in a one-on-one, a weekly one-on-one, monthly one-on-ones. If it's an annual performance review, is the best you can do as a formal performance review process, because you have a company of 12 people and you see each other and talk to each other every single day. As long as the culture is that their feedback is given, and when an employee wants to know where they stand, they feel comfortable coming to you and asking you, and they'll get an honest response. And that's like bare bones for my clients, where I start with them.
Yeah, you call it bare bones, but for so many businesses, that's probably revolutionary, that they've never had those things in there, and they've never thought about that big C word that you're already throwing out there that we've got to talk about, of culture. Let's go there. Obviously, every business podcast in the world has talked about culture in so many different ways, but I'm biased in the fact that I think that your niche is the coolest of all, because small businesses, we get to make a big change in our culture. If Amazon hired you and I tomorrow, well, we can't really revolutionize their internal culture at a company of that scale. But for small business owners, we can. One hire can radically transform our culture. We as the business owners, we can radically transform our culture. Of course, it's an intangible thing. So Melanie, from your perspective and with all your strategies and tactics up your sleeves, how do we start to build that culture? What are the questions that we need to ask? And most importantly, what are the actions that we can take to actually make that culture come alive?
You know, I take a very, very customized approach with culture, and I kind of granular, to be honest, because I'm working with these small business owners that are really building something from the ground up. Everything you do with your people is building your culture. How you decide to give PTO, if you decide to give PTO as part of your business, how you decide to pay people. I have companies that pay people weekly because they feel like they want to give that's their culture. I want people to get paid every week. Doesn't matter that it costs me more money to do it that way, rather than paying monthly or biweekly. It's every little policy and how you handle your business builds your culture, and your culture is unique to you. And that's the thing with entrepreneurs that I find. They are very unique human beings and they're on their own, doing their own thing for a reason, and they want to always keep that uniqueness at the forefront of whatever they do. And so my goal is to always understand what makes this owner or this company unique, and how they look at the world, the vision for growing their business, and everything we do, what systems we put in place is tied to that. So it is very, very customized. And let's say you don't even put a system in place because you have a small employee pool that doesn't necessarily, you're like, they're not going to appreciate that. How do we then take care of our employees in a way that suits them as well? So you're taking all of that into consideration. And I will say every policy should reflect who you are as a company, and how you want your employees to feel about you as an owner and about showing up to work every day. And that is different based on the personality, typically, of the owner. In a small business, they are driving the personality and thereby the culture of their company. So it's a customized approach, but it's not a big swooping efforts. It's not surveying, although employee surveys are part of, often what I do and what I advise companies to do. It's not having big birthday celebrations for your employees every month. Some companies and employees don't care about that. It's not who they are. They do other things, like give employees extra days off around the holidays, and because that's important to them. Which holidays, that they might give off to employees might matter more to some companies than others. So it's really, I believe, every step and everything that's put in place when you're building the infrastructure of HR should reflect the culture you're trying to create in your company.
Yeah, which listeners, Melanie just called all of us out that the only way that we can start to answer that is to know which values we have, is to know what we stand for, is to know the culture that we want to aspire towards. We can't do any of these things unintentionally, that none of them will happen by mistake. And if you do get a culture by mistake, it's probably not the one that it is that you're looking for. So Melanie, I really appreciate the intentionality and the strategic thought that you give to these matters, because obviously that's incredibly important. And I want to ask you just a quick interjection into our conversation. How does this stuff differ? How can we pertain if our teams are global? Just knowing where so many of our listeners are all around the world, and even here in the United States, how many people have global teams where their office space is their Slack channels or their email inboxes or Microsoft Teams? Obviously the answer is yes, we can still create culture there, but how do you adjust your tactics or your strategies for that sort of environment?
I think if you're a company that has any global team members whatsoever, you are definitely going to have to create a culture of inclusivity. And that flows really into a culture of open, honest feedback. So if you are wanting to make sure that those individuals feel heard and understood, because maybe they're different culture, different mindset, beliefs around different things because of where they're working versus in the US, you definitely have to take an intentional approach to be inclusive out the gate, to understand what is important to those employees, and then weave those as it makes sense to your company's personality into the DNA of your company. But you, again, back to what you just said, you have to know who you are. You have to know what you stand for and the values you want to put out into the world as a company. So you're hiring individuals either in the US or abroad who also match those values.
Yeah, so well said, Melanie. I love that answer. I encourage listeners, use that backwards 30 seconds button on your favorite podcast player and re-listen to what Melanie just said, because these are important considerations for all of us. And really, this should be the start of you thinking about it. It should be the start of the conversation of you tuning into this episode. I want to shift gears a little bit, Melanie, because I also know that every listener wants to talk about AI in today's day and age. And I know that in the world of HR, it's changing. All my friends who are still in the corporate world, I hear how much AI is reshaping hiring. Heck, it's reshaping even before they ever get to the interview phase, is that AI is looking through resumes and cover letters and identifying candidates for jobs. How's AI shaking up your industry and the type of work that you do with clients? Well,
I have a very simple answer. Is I work with companies that are 50 and under employees, and are not and not necessarily technology-driven companies. So I can only speak from my experience, is that they are not at a place where AI is really impacting the day-to-day impact of HR. It is, now, there is a talk, and it hasn't become a big component yet of HR, of incorporating AI policies in a handbook, because if your employees are using AI to complete their work, you want to maybe have some rules around how that's done and have some control and understanding of what's okay and what's not okay in use of AI in the workplace. So in that respect, AI is coming into HR, and from that component, from a recruiting standpoint, most companies that are 50 and under employees, I have a client that has 12 employees, AI is not coming into play in recruiting, because they are not hiring masses of employees. You're not hiring at a large company. When you are hiring, you may have 100, 200 open positions at any given time and thousands of applicants. Yeah, AI is coming into play, and how do you sort through and give attention and understand who are the people or the candidates you need to put your eyes on. In a small business, your eyes are on, the 10 or 30 applicants that maybe applied for your one job you have open. And it's still very people centric. So we'll see, but that's where I am with AI right now.
Yeah, I love that, especially because that is part of our collective advantages as small business owners, is that we get to have that personal touch. And coming back to the Amazon example, we have to be even pickier when it comes to hiring, because every single hire makes such a close and important and big impact on our businesses and on our culture and on our team. So I love hearing your insights there, Melanie. I want to ask you about talent retention, because time is flying by in this episode, and I know that that's something that a lot of people obsess about, the hiring component. I really appreciate how much emphasis you put on the retaining component as well in the work that you do. A lot of people think talent retention looks like just what we all got used to in our corporate careers, of every year you get X% raise, and we call that talent retention. Obviously, you go way deeper with your small business clients. What does that look like? What are some of those tools and strategies you have?
Yeah, talent retention looks very different for a small business than it does for your typical larger company, because I found where it's a small business, they're maybe at 3 to 5 employees, and they're like, okay, we're growing by leaps and bounds. We're probably going to hire double our size, which is you're going from 5 to 10 people, which is not huge, right? But those additional 5 people are going to make a big difference in your business. That's the whole point. You're at a place to really take your business to the next level, really. So great, you want to hire them. And so I get a lot of business owners who think that's the most important part, is how to find the right people and hire them. But my question is, if you have no HR infrastructure in place, you might get lucky and hire the 5 best people you could possibly find. But how are you keeping them? Because how are you deciding the compensation for them? What benefits are you offering? What structure have you put in place to manage their performance and grow them professionally in the business? And, what is your feedback mechanisms? And, how over time do you plan to compensate them fairly to keep them? And that's the part that's actually it's just as important as if hiring the right people, is putting those components in place over time, because you may not be able to do all those things out of the gate, but you intentional about putting all of those components over time as you build your business to retain your employees. So maybe you don't have benefits because you don't maybe have to have them at that size, but you still can put benefits in place. So what can you afford? What is important to the employees you're hiring, and put those benefits in place. And there's definitely out the box ways to solve that problem without just going with a broker and a carrier and putting your regular benefits, medical benefits in place, PTO, compensation. You have a lot of flexibility as a small business to compensate individuals as they grow and perform in their job, more so than a large structured organization. Use that to your advantage. Recognize people as their response. In small businesses, people wear many different hats. And as a company grows, those individuals become more specialized in their roles, take on more responsibility. And as a small business, you can compensate and reward those individuals who step into those specialized roles as you grow. So it's a great way to retain your employees.
So well said. Melanie, the more I hear you talk about these things, it's clear to me that these are complex issues, complex problems to solve. And there's nothing more complex in this world than people and unleashing people as part of our growth teams, because we're all working towards something that is bigger than all of us individually. And I love the fact that you bring these really simple solutions that start with super intentional questions. That's what I keep hearing. And that's why I feel like listeners are going to have a lot of homework after our HR episode together here today. And so I want to lay one more thing onto them, Melanie. And the question that I always ask at the end of every episode, it's super broad. You can take it in any direction you want. And that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different phases of their own growth journeys and their team development journeys, and also knowing that you're one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur, not just a subject matter expert. What's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
Well, I'm going to talk to the entrepreneurs out there, because one of my goals and my missions with my company, Strategic People Solutions, is really to change the view of HR in business, specifically in small business. So I know that owners, if they come from other companies, they maybe have some other experience of HR, but when they open their own business, they see HR typically in a stereotypical point of view. And what I want to challenge entrepreneurs to do is to, quit avoiding HR because it feels overwhelming, because HR is like 90% gray and a very tiny percent black and white. And so it's easy to avoid. I'm going to say step into the discomfort of dealing with your people, issues, or your people problems, or just your people, because people are complex. No matter how you break it down, we're very complex, species. And step into the discomfort and really look for a people partner. You don't have to hire someone on your staff if you're too small for that. There are fractional HR professionals just like me who specialize in the space, who can come alongside you and help bring some clarity to what feels like confusion and be overwhelmness to you as an entrepreneur. So I challenge, entrepreneurs to get out of their comfort zone and seek someone out who can help kind of clear the air for them, so to speak, and create some structure. And ultimately, it will make your business and your employees so much better off if you just reach for help in that area.
Boom. I love that advice for our listeners. This is something, Melanie, I'm 18 years into my entrepreneurial journey, and it's advice that I need to be reminded of constantly, because it's so easy for us to laser focus in on the things that we're directly working on, but zooming out, leveraging even fractionals and experts like you who can come in and read the label from outside the jar, because we're inside the jar, and it's not always the easiest to read the label from inside the jar. So I so appreciate that advice. I'm going to use it as a natural segue. You're making my life easy here today to talk to listeners. If they want to check out all the great work that you're doing with Strategic People Solutions, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
So obviously I'm on LinkedIn. Easily find me there and ping me. I love to connect on LinkedIn with professionals and business owners all over the country. I also have a website, which is SPS Consulting HR, which really goes into a little more detail about the services I offer, and also a way to contact me as well.
Yes, and speaking of easy ways to reach out to you, listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links to both Melanie's website as well as her personal LinkedIn down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So check those links out. You don't have to remember anything. If you're on the go, don't worry. Come back to the show notes. You can click right on through. Otherwise, Melanie, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. It's been great. Appreciate it.